Dokja, whose name can be translated as reader or only child, is a 28-year-old young man who graduated from a 4th-tier university and is currently employed in a subsidiary of a large corporation. Due to his name, given by his father as a reminder that he should always be an independent person, our protagonist often has to explain that only child is not a characteristic of his, but his name, which causes confusion. However, his father was somewhat right in choosing his name, as young Dokja is independent but also lonely. Due to his solitary life, his favorite pastime is reading a novel that is published online every week, of which apparently he is the only reader. Thus, every week, on the train to work, our young protagonist reads a chapter of his apocalyptic novel on his cell phone. One day, Dokja is reading his novel on the train when he suddenly notices that Sanga Yu, a beautiful young woman who works in the human resources section of his company, is standing next to him, watching him. Sanga, who is standing next to him on the train, greets him kindly and tells him that she was lucky because her section's boss went on a business trip, which gave her the opportunity to leave work early. Sanga gains confidence and sits next to him, which surprises Dokja, as this beautiful woman is one of the most popular girls in the company. Dokja asks her if she always travels by train, and Sanga tells him that someone stole her bicycle, so she was forced to take the train to get back home. Dokja finds it curious that the woman travels by bicycle, and she tells him that she's been working long hours and needed some exercise, in addition to having some personal reasons. While she speaks, our protagonist looks at her and realizes why everyone is in love with this beautiful and charming woman. But it's not something that concerns him. After all, their lives are very different. However, Dokja has something else on his mind on this special day, not because Sanga sat next to him, but because the final chapter of his favorite novel is about to be published. Sanga notices Dokja reading his novel and asks him what it's about and who the author is, but he tells her that she probably wouldn't know him, and he's not entirely wrong, as that novel has only one reader, himself. Besides, he doesn't feel confident enough to reveal to the woman that the novel he's reading is a post-apocalyptic story. Dokja returns to his story, 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, because today, when the next chapter is published online, he will reach the end of the story he has been reading for the past 10 years. Our protagonist remembers how special that novel is to him since he has been following it since his last year of high school, and it has been by his side in difficult times, like when he was bullied or when he failed to get into the top universities and ended up in a 4th-tier one, and even during his mandatory military service on the front lines. Dokja continues with his novel, even in his sad present as a contracted employee. He never lasts long in a company before being sent to another. Despite the seeming insignificance of his life, the novel and its characters have always been a constant company for him, so today's event holds great importance in his life. Despite being passionate about the story, our protagonist is surprised that the website and the author bother to publish a story that literally has only one reader for so long. However, the story wasn't always such an evident failure, as it started with around 12 visits, and the number of readers gradually decreased. Dokja even considered contributing financially to the author, but lacking money, he could only settle for leaving positive comments, thanking the writer for all their work and even recommending it to some acquaintances without success. Dokja resumes the conversation with Sanga and changes the subject, talking about his work and job prospects. Dokja congratulates Sanga for being hired permanently by the company, which fills her with joy, while he remains a contracted employee. This conversation becomes a bit uncomfortable, and suddenly Dokja receives a message from an unexpected sender, TLS 123, the author of his favorite novel. TLS 123 chats with our hero and thanks him for his support, as thanks to him, they were able to find the strength to finish the novel and even won a contest, which surprises Dokja, who hadn't heard anything about it. TLS 123 informs Dokja that, starting from the publication of the epilogue, TWSA will become paid content, so before that happens, they would like to give him a gift and asks for his email address. Our hero receives an email from TLS 123 thanking him for his support, and wishing him that the gift will be useful for what is to come. Suddenly, just as the epilogue of the novel is published, the lights on the train go out, and the conductor informs the passengers that there is some kind of emergency and asks them to leave the vehicle. A strange light appears, and a voice announces that the free service of the planetary system 8612 has ended and that the main event begins from that moment onward. While people are trapped in the dark train car, watching as a light slowly manifests before them, the only word that comes to our hero's mind is Dokkaebi, a strange Korean creature similar to what we know as a goblin. Interestingly, Sangha seems to be thinking exactly the same thing. Dokja can't believe what is happening before his eyes, as it seems straight out of his novel, and everyone he thought he knew takes a 180-degree turn when, out of nowhere, a Dokja appears floating. The creature addresses the train occupants, who don't understand what they are seeing. Some even believe they are witnessing an augmented reality show. Although the Dokja tries to communicate, no one understands its language, so they don't know what it's saying. However, Dokja knows very well, as he is experiencing the beginning of TMSA, when the monster announces the impending danger to humanity. Suddenly, the creature starts speaking in the same language as humans, apologizing for the inconvenience caused by a faulty translator. The Dokja resumes its speech but is interrupted by several train passengers who don't find it amusing that their journey is being interrupted by a childish prank. Dokja knows what is coming and knows he can't do anything to stop it, so he tells Sangha to step back. More people confront the creature, causing the amiable monster to lose its temper and use its mental powers to make the heads of the people arguing with it explode. As the Dokja kills several people inside the train, Dokja has no choice but to admit that the events described in his novel are now happening in the real world. The Dokja insults the people, saying that humans have had it too easy, living without paying the price, and informs them that is about to change. A wealthy man, Mr. Han, whom Dokja and Sangha know from work, offers money to the creature, but the Dokja burns the money, saying that from now on money has no value, especially not to creatures like him. The Dokja tells them it's time to stop wasting time because the longer they wait, the more debts accumulate. Therefore, it decides that the easiest way is for each human to try to earn money on their own. The creature disappears, and suddenly an individual screen appears in front of each person, ordering them to kill as many living beings as possible within a 30-minute period. The winner will be rewarded with 300 coins, and the losers will be punished with death. Chaos reigns inside the train car. Nobody understands what's happening, except Dokja, who explains to a confused Sangha that what is happening is real, and they must face it like a survival video game, something she has experience with. Our hero investigates the car and realizes that everyone has fallen prey to panic. Having the power of information, our protagonist knows what is happening. But now comes the difficult part, surviving this. Seeing how fear has taken hold of the people, one of the passengers decides to take control of the situation and tells the others that they must stay calm because in cases like this, all it takes is a spark for everyone to explode and the situation to turn violent. Another passenger asks who he thinks he is to take control of the train, and the man identifies himself as a military officer, informing them that apparently the same situation is happening everywhere. People demand explanations, but the soldier tells them that we'll have to wait because no one tells a simple soldier like him anything, so they must focus on the current problem. Dokja recognizes the soldier, not because he has met him before, but because he is Lieutenant Hyunseong, one of the supporting characters in TMSA. However, something is wrong because as he remembers, Hyunseong doesn't appear like this in the novel but in a later event. But he's not sure since the novel disappeared after it became a paid event, and now our protagonist must rely on his memory. One of the passengers reports that the Prime Minister is delivering a message and confirms that they are facing a level 1 national emergency. The Prime Minister accuses a rebel cell of the attacks, but Dokja knows the truth. Suddenly, in the air, the Prime Minister is assassinated, and the Dokja appears again, saying that what the government says is not true and there is nothing they can do to avoid their fate, and they must play whether they want to or not. Knowing that people are good at playing, the creature decides to make things more interesting and accelerates the countdown, giving citizens only 10 minutes to achieve their goal. People turn to Hyunseong as their guide, and Dokja remembers that things are happening according to the order of the book. Although Hyunseong has already been introduced, and someone much more important is yet to be introduced. Suddenly, people hear disturbances in the adjacent car and notice that people are attacking each other. The passengers try to escape, but a magical barrier prevents them from doing so. Hyunseong tells them that nobody will go anywhere until the game is over, and to prove that he is serious, he shows them images of a girls' high school where the students are unwilling to fight, so the creature causes their heads to explode. However, one of the students decides to participate and kills her classmates. After finishing off the last of her friends, the young student Jihai is declared the winner of the high school. Observing this and understanding the rules of the game, the people in the car begin to look at each other cautiously. As tension rises inside the train car, Dokja wonders why Elle hasn't appeared and doubts if he is remembering the events of the novel correctly since he read the first chapter 10 years ago. The young man regrets that the novel has been erased from the internet, But suddenly he remembers TLS 123's gift and realizes that he has an email attachment with the complete book that he can now review. Dokja knows that in the world of TMSA, each person has a special attribute that can be seen in the attribute window, and he tries to access it. But he discovers that his window cannot be opened, so he doesn't know what his special ability is. Trying to stay calm, Dokja decides to open the attachment, and suddenly one of his attributes activates, the speed reading ability. In this way, our protagonist is able to read the first chapters of the novel in a matter of seconds, and thanks to that, the pieces start falling into their proper place. Throughout this time, Dokja was confused because the events are happening exactly as they occur in the novel, with the difference that they are taking place in a different location. The events narrated in the novel and the introduction of the hero are unfolding, but in the adjacent train car, which is different from the one that, according to the book, will only have 2 survivors. Logically, one of the survivors will be Hyunseong, but Dokja wonders who the other one will be, knowing that he will die in the next few minutes. Nerves reach a critical point, and one of the passengers, Namwoon, decides to enter the system and follow the rules of the game by killing another passenger. Dokja recognizes the young man as one of the first humans to adapt to this wild new world. Namwoon incites the rest of the passengers to kill an old woman to fulfill the game's mission, and the others join in the brutal beating. Dokja watches as the group has turned into a savage horde, but he knows that he can't do anything to stop it. Sangha tries to help the old woman, but Dokja stops her, telling her that she will only get herself killed too. The woman is disappointed with the boy, but what Dokja doesn't reveal to her is that he is not just watching, but he is waiting. Suddenly, one of the train's doors explodes, and at that moment, Dokja starts running, urging Sangha to follow him. Dokja harnesses the forceful blast of the explosion and pushes Namwoon away from the old woman, making it look like an accident. This causes everyone to scatter, and amidst the smoke, they search for the poor woman to finish the job. Meanwhile, Dokja has another target in mind and spots a child who is traveling with them on the train, along with his box of lobsters. Our protagonist gathers his courage and approaches the mob, telling them that this is not the way to win the game, let alone how to treat others. Namwoon scoffs, saying that this is indeed how to play, but Dokja tells him that the rules state that in order to survive, they must kill. But if they all kill the old woman, only the one who delivers the fatal blow will receive the points. The others will have to find another person to kill, and so on, until only one survivor remains, or maybe none at all. Dokja also tells them that the rules never specify killing another person, but rather a living being, and he demonstrates this by crushing one of the lobsters, which the system considers a point. Dokja throws the box with the remaining lobsters, causing the passengers to focus on finding them and saving the old woman's life. Namwoon tells him that the box doesn't have enough lobsters for everyone and that he is only delaying the inevitable, and that he should adapt to the new world where only the strongest will survive. Dokja reads Namwoon's stats, thus discovering that another one of his attributes is reading the stats of others. Namwoon's unstable stats reveal what everyone suspected. The young man is a psychopath with a certain weakness for drama, making him an immediate threat and a perfect candidate for the new world. Dokja remembers that, according to the book, many dramatic youths decided to take their own lives during the apocalypse. But Namwoon, on the other hand, thrived in this hostile environment. Seeing Dokja's potential, Namwoon decides to invite him to join him. In the main carriage, the protagonist of TMSA moves forward without knowing what is happening with Dokja and his group. Our hero politely rejects Namwoon's offer, telling him that he works alone. The deranged young man tells him that it's okay, that he understands, but asks him to step aside to finish taking care of the old woman. Dokja knows that joining Namwoon would be a sure way to ensure his safety, but after so many years of reading TMSA, he has come to hate the character. Thus, our protagonist stands between Namwoon and his victim, provoking the anger of the dangerous young man. Namwoon attacks Dokja using his dark power ability, but our hero is able to dodge the blow. Namwoon continues to attack and realizes that the previous evasion was not luck, as Dokja is able to dodge and block each of his attacks. The villain realizes that as he uses his abilities, he becomes more powerful, which impresses Dokja, who now understands why the hero recruited him for his team despite being such a despicable person. Suddenly, Dokja unlocks a new ability called Omniscient Reader's Perspective, which allows him to be aware of everything that happens around him in great detail. Therefore, he is able, without any inconvenience, to dodge Namwoon's blows since he knows in advance where they will end up. However, Dokja realizes that this is a defensive ability, and he cannot defeat Namwoon. Nevertheless, he knows that he just has to wait, as the young man has not claimed any lives yet, and there are only 2 minutes left in the game. Namwoon realizes this and directs his attention to the old woman, so Dokja must protect her. Namwoon pulls out a dagger from his pocket and attacks Dokja again, who, while protecting the old woman, cannot dodge the blow and receives a wound on his arm. Injured, Dokja decides that he has had enough of this survival of the fittest attitude that has always placed him at the bottom of the food chain. It's time to play the game by his own rules. The young man finds a bag of lobster larvae and comes to the conclusion that each of the hundreds of lobster eggs is equivalent to hundreds of lives. Therefore, he crushes them, adding a huge amount of points and coins in his favor. Namwoon lunges with the knife in hand, but Dokja uses 27 coins to buy the Constitution ability, which gives him greater physical power, making him invulnerable to Namwoon's attacks, who fails to stab him. The psychotic young man continues trying to stab our hero unsuccessfully as the time limit runs out, and it's time to review the results. Those who were unable to kill anyone are punished with death. Thus, in the train carriage, only 5 survivors remain. Dokja returns to the carriage to meet up with the survivors and discovers that only 5 people managed to escape the deadly trap alive: Hyunseong, Sangha, Gilyeong, Mr. Han, and finally Dokja. Dokja stands in front of Namwoon's lifeless body and remembers how in his final moments, the terrifying young man begged for his life. However, following his own philosophy, Dokja refused to help him. Although this event doesn't seem to traumatize him, Dokja feels as if he's reading the novel instead of living it. Dokja's counter activates, revealing his score. He has killed a lobster and 123 eggs. However, he incurs some penalties since killing defenseless creatures will only grant him half the points. After deducting the points spent on strengthening his body, our hero receives a considerable sum of 35 coins. As additional rewards are calculated for him and his companions, the game officially comes to an end, and the train starts moving again. The survivors rejoice knowing that they will soon reach home. However, this is far from reality as they emerge to the surface and discover that the world they knew no longer exists, and the city is being attacked by terrible giant creatures. One of these creatures is a massive ichthyosaur or sea serpent, which passes by the train without paying it any attention. Dokja explains that no monster interferes with another's event, and they are focused on their own events. While everyone looks outside, Dokja observes Dokja, who appears very happy. According to Dokja's data, 21 constellations have witnessed what happened on the train, a very high number, especially for a rookie like the Goblin. Dokja is aware that constellations are like space races that observe events as entertainment. He thinks to himself that it's better for them to enjoy the show for now, as they don't know what awaits them. Some constellations feel hostility towards Dokja since Namwoon was their favorite, and according to the original story, he is the only survivor of the train event. However, just as he has detractors, other constellations admire our hero and give him coins as a show of support. Sangha approaches Dokja, interrupting his thoughts, and asks if he's okay. He apologizes for not being able to save the old woman, but she thanks him because by throwing the lobster box in her direction, he was able to kill one of them and save her life. Dokja looks at the rest of the survivors and is not surprised to discover that Hyunseong has also survived due to his strength and athletic ability. When he sees young Gilyeong, he remembers that when he asked for the lobsters, he gave him one, which saved the boy's life. Seeing that the boy is clearly scared, Dokja tells him to stay close to him and promises to protect him. This gesture wins the favor of some constellations who appreciate our hero's kindness and bravery, and they award him more coins as a reward. Mr. Han is also among the survivors, and Dokja can't understand how he managed to survive. He attributes it to luck, as it seems inexplicable in his case. Dokja is very pleased because not only something interesting has happened in the carriage they are in, but something great has also happened in the neighboring carriage. The goblin is impressed because he expected fewer survivors, but this situation is positive. Even some constellations, impressed by the performance of our heroes, have decided to sponsor them, which translates into better equipment and rewards. Of course, none of the people present, except Dokja, have any idea what Dokja is referring to. Instead of explaining it again, the creature decides to show them instead of telling them. Dokja is tempted by 4 sponsors among whom he can only choose one. The young man feels impressed since the very hero of the story received 5 offers, so in comparison, it's not bad at all. Sangha asks him what sponsors are, and he responds that he doesn't know and to take it as a stroke of luck. Our hero explains that sponsors are beings from the same constellations who have decided to share their power with him. Although the sponsors are secretive, Dokja knows them well after reading the novel. The first constellation interested in Dokja is the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, a very powerful entity, but with the drawback that as the user makes use of its power, they slowly lose their sanity, becoming increasingly mad and dangerous in the process. Dokja recalls that in the original story, this constellation favored Namwoon, which makes him curious why it now makes the offer to him. The second offer comes from the pseudo-demonic Fiery Judge, whose name can be misleading as it's not a demon, but quite the opposite. This constellation is a Justicar entity represented by the Archangel Uriel. Dokja decides to pass on this offer since, although powerful, benevolent constellations tend to be very restrictive in the use of power. The third sponsor self-proclaims as the mysterious conspirator, and for some strange reason, our hero seems not to remember them. Dokja is tempted to check the book again for more references, but decides to explore the fourth sponsor. To his surprise, this is the constellation known as the Prisoner of the Diadem, whose name conceals the identity of none other than Sun Wukong, better known as the Monkey King, one of the most powerful creatures in the novel. Our protagonists choose their sponsor, and Dokja is impressed by one of the choices. The small creature departs, telling them that they will return in 10 minutes with the next event. The heroes regroup and choose Dokja as their leader, as he is responsible for saving their lives and seems to have his emotions under control. Even Mr. Han tries to align himself with him by using his power in the office as an advantage. But knowing that offices no longer exist, our hero rejects it, creating tension between them. Dokja tells them they must leave the train, which surprises the rest since the outside is full of monsters. However, our protagonist explains that no matter what is outside, what is inside the neighboring carriage is much worse. Suddenly, a strong impact interrupts their conversation. It's the inhabitant of the second carriage. Dokja orders his companions to find an exit while the pounding from the other side grows stronger. The team rushes to explore the train in search of an escape route. They discover that despite not having a magical barrier, the doors are faulty and don't open easily. As they search for an exit, Dokja explains that the inhabitant of the second carriage is extremely dangerous and poses a much greater threat than the monsters outside the train. He warns them to avoid directly confronting him. While our protagonists search for an exit, the pounding on the neighboring door grows louder. Whatever is on the other side of the train car door keeps pounding to get in, and our heroes try to find a way out of their predicament. The doors are locked, and neither Dokja nor his companions have the physical strength to open them. Even when working together, Dokja calms down a bit and recalls Hyunseong's abilities, telling him that he can increase his physical strength and easily open the door. The soldier tells him that even if that were true, he has no idea how to use that ability. Dokja responds that to activate it, he just has to imagine himself using it. That's how easy it is. Hyunseong activates his ability, and thanks to his increased physical strength, he is able to open the train car door. The group manages to escape unharmed. However, Dokja is worried because he knows very well what lies ahead. As the group runs along the train tracks, a disappointed Dokja appears and tells them that he had asked them to wait, and that he hasn't finished preparing the next event yet, but now they will have to participate in it. Thus, the second event begins, titled Escape, which involves crossing the broken bridge on foot and reaching Oksu Station. The time limit is 20 minutes, with a reward of 200 coins for the winners. However, the event's instructions do not clarify what the punishment will be for those who fail in their attempt. Dokja tells his companions to run, and Sangha asks what is happening if the bridge is not broken. Dokja realizes that by escaping from the train car earlier than expected, Dokja hasn't had time yet to blow up the bridge. They must take advantage of this opportunity and move forward before that happens. While running, Dokja realizes that there is no way to win this event without breaking the rules. The group advances, and Dokja feels optimistic that they can reach their destination before the bridge collapses. However, our hero celebrates too soon, as a gigantic sea serpent emerges from the ocean. Dokja knows that serpents do not attack people with sponsorships at this stage of the novel, so it is most likely that the creature is there solely to destroy the bridge. With 200 meters left to reach their destination, he tells his companions to pick up the pace. Dokja, considering an event without complications to be boring, decides to add some excitement and resurrects the dead from the train cars, who start chasing them. Hyunseong and Gilyong arrive safely at the next station, But the undead delay Dokja, Sanga, and Han, who are unable to reach their goal before the sea serpent destroys the bridge. When the dust settles, Dokja and company discover that where the bridge used to be, there is now an impossible gap to jump. Our hero, who had already anticipated this would happen, is surprised to see that Sanga and Han have also survived the attack. Suddenly, a strange light descends from the sky as a blessing called DEUSXMACHINA has been activated. The blessing manifests itself as a bridge of light that, according to the new rules, can only be used by an even number of players, otherwise the bridge will disappear. Sanga tells Dokja that something strange is happening to her, and she feels dizzy, leading our protagonist to understand that the blessing comes from the sponsor of the young woman. This blessing is a direct manifestation of the constellations, something that, according to Dokja, is very rare in TMSA, and he would like to delve into which constellation is sponsoring Sanga. Driven by curiosity, Dokja tries to check Sanga's character profile, but he is surprised to find that for some reason he cannot do it and the girl's data remains hidden. Our hero wonders why this is. However, that distraction almost costs him his life when he is suddenly attacked by a humanoid demon. Humanoid demons are reanimated corpses whose power has been enhanced by negative energy. They harness the power of the person when they were alive, and the more powerful that person was, the more powerful the demon is. To Dokja's misfortune, this demon has possessed Namwoon's body, which means that even after death, the psychotic young man remains a problem. Our hero tries to activate the omniscient reader ability, but since the demon lacks consciousness, it becomes too unpredictable. If our heroes want to survive, only two can cross the bridge, and one of them must die. Before deciding who will be who, Dokja turns around and discovers that Han is carrying Sanga on his shoulders, ready to abandon him to his fate. Dokja tries to check Han's character sheet, but he can't do it either. Our protagonist deduces that the reason is that neither Han nor Sanga are part of TMSA, so he doesn't have access to their data. Sanga and Han manage to cross the bridge, and Dokja realizes that time is running out. Our hero wonders if dragging the demon with him counts, but he prefers not to crawl. Standing between the abyss and a horde of demons, he tells himself that he would like to have a combat ability. Suddenly, an unknown ability to Dokja, one he had never read about, activates the marker ability. This ability allows him to access the abilities of other characters in the book, but so far he has only interacted with Namwoon and Hyunseong, so he can only choose one of them. Dokja chooses Namwoon and suddenly he is able to use the skills of the young assassin, allowing him to quickly defeat the demon. After defeating the demon Namwoon, there are only 10 minutes left to cross the bridge, but Dokja is still alone. According to his calculations, it's only a matter of time when suddenly the train that carried our heroes explodes and the protagonist of the story approaches Dokja. Thus, as he advanced amidst the army of zombies, the feared protagonist of the story stops in front of Dokja and asks him who he is. Dokja ponders whether he should confront the protagonist, although he is certain of the outcome that would entail, so he decides to use his omniscient reader ability to gather data about his potential enemy, or savior. In this way, we discover that the name of the TMSA protagonist is Hyuk-yu and that he possesses an impressive collection of skills. Hyuk grabs Dokja by the neck, leaving him hanging on the edge of the precipice, and asks him how he managed to survive the train event. The rest of the group on the other side of the bridge tries to see what is happening with Dokja, but a magical barrier prevents them from seeing, so they can only speculate about what is going on. Back with our hero, Hyuk asks him again for his identity, to which he responds with his name, adding a joke about it, which earns him a punch from Hyuk. The violent young man realizes that Dokja is resilient and is impressed by the fact that he has learned to use the coins. Dokja finds himself in a dangerous situation, as Hyuk has lost almost all of his humanity due to the multiple regressions he has experienced, making him the most dangerous living being in this stage of the novel. Dokja decides to change tactics and tells Hyuk that, being younger than him, he should show him respect. This causes the protagonist of the story, seeing that our hero is confident, to become somewhat more cautious with him. Hyuk asks Dokja if he knows who he is, to which he responds affirmatively, as Hyuk is famous and Dokja is one of his biggest fans, or so he claims. Obviously, it's a lie, as Hyuk is an original character of the novel and did not exist until this disaster happened, although he enjoyed fame within the book. However, Dokja admits that, although he is lying, he admires the warrior, but only because he is a fan of the novel. Hyuk's ego is satisfied with the response, and the young man relaxes a bit in front of Dokja, but still asks him how he managed to survive the train event. Dokja doesn't know what to answer, as a wrong answer could mean his end. Therefore, he decides to activate his omniscient reader ability to read the mind of the young man and find the answer that satisfies him. By reading Hyuk's mind, Dokja realizes that the protagonist of the story is confused because he knew that the only survivors from his carriage were supposed to be Namwoon and Hyunseong. But Namwoon is dead, and there are more people who have survived the event. The hero needs information, and if the answer that comes out of Dokja's mouth doesn't satisfy him and is considered a threat, he will eliminate him. Dokja tells him about his insect tactic, which surprises Hyunseong, who has realized that, for some reason, the future is changing and wonders if he has something to do with it. Likewise, something bothers Hyuk, as Dokja is too calm considering the position he is in, and beyond any other explanation. It is true that he alone eliminated Namwoon. Hyuk uses his attribute called Wise Eye, which not only allows him to see others' attributes but also the deepest secrets of any person. However, our hero involuntarily uses an attribute called the Fourth Wall, which blocks Hyuk's ability and overwhelms the young hero, who asks Dokja who he really is. Meanwhile, there are 2 minutes and 14 seconds left until the event ends, and Dokja is still on the wrong side of the bridge. Hyuk decides that he must finish off Dokja, but our protagonist realizes that he needs to change tactics if he wants to survive. Therefore, he tells Hyuk that he needs a reliable ally if he wants to complete Event 46. Hyuk is confused and thinks that Dokja could be a regressor like him. But that's impossible because if he were, he would recognize him. Dokja tells him that he knows the future that Hyuk doesn't know, and that will be very useful for both of them if they become allies. The warrior uses his ability to detect lies and realizes that Dokja is telling the truth. He is surprised because he has met another prophet besides the young woman known as Anna Croft. Dokja knows that Hyuk's knowledge of the future is incomplete due to being a regressor. In other words, a warrior condemned to repeat his history over and over again. Despite having knowledge of what will happen, the future usually changes as he makes different decisions based on his memories. The only way they can know their own future is by repeating the past exactly. Dokja offers to be Hyuk's prophet and help him save the world. The warrior thinks that having someone with those abilities would be very useful, not only to overcome Event 46 but also to defeat an enemy named Zarathustra. With seconds left until the event ends, Hyuk makes a decision and accepts Dokja as his companion, dragging him to the other side of the light bridge. However, before crossing to the other side, Hyuk decides to test our hero and hangs him over the abyss at the mercy of a sea serpent, while asking if he knows what will happen. Tired of Hyuk's bravado, Dokja tells him that if he wants to let him go, he should do it once and for all and go to hell. Hyuk finally lets him go, and Dokja falls into the jaws of the sea serpent. The time limit has come, and Dokja failed to complete the event. Dokja lands safely inside the stomach of the sea serpent. Far from being scared, our hero realizes that this is actually a test from Hyunseong to see if he is worthy of being his companion, as after reading his adventures for 10 years, he knows him well. Since Hyunseong failed in his first round and then became almost like a god, it became increasingly difficult for him to see humans as anything more than mere insects, only subordinates and enemies. Dokja knows that he has about 3 hours to escape from the creature's stomach before the gastric juices do their work and finish him off. The constellations pay close attention to our protagonist. Some hate him, others admire him, so he continues to earn coins despite this setback. Dokja sits calmly, planning his next move, when a familiar voice addresses him. The Dokja appears behind him, mocking and saying that he is a little disappointed because the situation was getting interesting. The creature is curious about the fact that Dokja is not surprised to see him, and our protagonist tells him that he was actually expecting him. Dokja is determined to escape from the beast's stomach and thus prove to Hyunseong that he is worthy of being his companion, so he sets his escape plan in motion. The Dokja asks if it is true that Dokja was expecting him, and he responds that he knows the creature is coming for his coins. The creature asks why it would come for his coins instead of taking his life, but Dokja answers that if the price of failure were death, that would be written in the rules. Therefore, it is obvious that not completing this event has another punishment. The Dokja congratulates Dokja for being so clever and tells him that the price for continuing to live is 51 coins, all the coins that Dokja has in his possession. Dokja responds that he doesn't intend to pay that much money. The imp then tells him that he will have to kill him, and Dokja agrees, which confuses the Dokja. The creature doesn't know what to do, as it was actually just pretending, and Dokja knows it. No sender would get rid of their star player, and right now he is attracting many constellations. Furthermore, to prove that he is not an ordinary person, Dokja refers to the Dokja by his true name, Baehyung, and tells him that he is a rookie. The Dokja doesn't understand anything, and the constellations begin to wonder who Dokja really is. Our hero tells the creature that it would be best to talk privately, so he asks him to turn off the transmission channel for a minute. The creature obeys, and the two have a private conversation. Although Baeyoung wants to know why Dokja knows so much about transmissions and constellations, our hero prefers to keep the secret and instead offers him the opportunity to become the greatest of all senders. Dokja offers him a contract so that if Baeyoung accepts, he will become the king of all Dokjabss. Dokjabs laughs in Dokja's face as he can't believe what he's hearing, but he expected nothing less from someone crazy enough to reject the sponsorship of 4 constellations. This reveals that, up until now, our hero has been progressing using his own power without relying on any of them. Dokjabs tells him that he cannot be his sponsor since he is not a constellation. However, Dokja explains that's not what he has in mind. What he wants is not his power, but his channel. He proposes signing an exclusive contract with his channel, where the embodiment of a constellation is hosted in a single channel, and the owner of that channel receives a portion of the earnings from it. Normally, many players make contracts with channels unknowingly. Dokjabs laughs at the offer as he sees no value in giving a contract to an unsponsored player. However, Dokja tells him that's precisely the point and the reason why he should accept it. Dokja explains that there are 2 types of constellations watching the games, those who just want to have fun and those who want to sponsor a player to use them as the embodiment of their power, which is a status symbol depending on the player. In this way, by having a contract with an unsponsored player, Dokjabs would have something that no other channel has, a player who, without sponsorship and only with their own power, is capable of achieving victory. This is striking and entertaining for the constellations. Moreover, Dokja is a player who refuses to receive sponsorships, which will increase the constellation's desire to sponsor him. Dokjabs begins to carefully analyze the offer and tells Dokja that he will consider it. But first, he must collect the 51 coins that the young man owes him. However, a confident Dokja tells him that he doesn't owe him anything yet since being inside the serpent is a hidden level. Indeed, another window opens and informs our hero that the next event consists of killing the serpent, and the penalty for failure is death. Dokjabs reactivates the transmission, which earns him a reprimand from the constellations, who don't believe the disconnection was accidental. However, he is allowed to continue in the game. Dokja buys some cheap items to fulfill his new objective, and Dokjabs tells him that if he survives, they will have a more serious conversation about that contract. Dokja manages to get some spikes and a bit of slime just in time, as the serpent has activated its stomach arms. In this way, a confident Dokja decides that it's time to fulfill his mission. 4 days later, a victorious Dokja emerges from the stomach of the sea serpent, much to the delight of all the constellations watching the broadcast. It turns out that the items our hero bought, spikes and slime, were actually parts of sea creatures that are enemies of serpents. The spikes belonged to sea hedgehogs accustomed to fighting these creatures, so they were able to pierce the serpent's skin. And the slime protected Dokja from being consumed by the stomach acids as it belonged to a type of seahorse. In this way, our hero was able to climb towards freedom, feeding on the interior of the creature during the 4 days of his mission. Dokjabs is more than impressed and decides to accept the contract with our hero, which states that until he completes all the events or dies, he cannot choose any constellation, and will only be active on Baeyoung's channel, sharing the earnings. Dokja reads the contract and, although he wants to sign it, he realizes that the cunning little creature is trying to deceive him, unaware that he knows perfectly well how the world works. Dokja points out that, as he has no sponsor, the commission for receiving coins goes to Dokjabs, and he knows it is a more than generous amount. Therefore, he tells the creature that he will not share the coins with him, that he will keep his coins, and Baeyoung will keep the commission. The creature tries to negotiate but fails to change our hero's mind, so it ultimately agrees. This demonstrates that this whole situation has changed Dokja, and now the young man has started taking control of his life. The power dynamic between Dokja and Baeyoung suddenly shifts, and our protagonist begins giving orders to the dangerous creature, who, knowing what's best for it, starts obeying to keep its star happy. Dokja returns to solid ground proud of himself and everything he has accomplished thanks to his knowledge of the novel, feeling special for being the only person on the entire planet who bothered to read it. Our protagonist delves into a new level of challenge. This time, he finds himself in a city, and Dokja quickly realizes that the atmosphere is poisonous, so he must immediately hide underground if he wants to survive. Thus, the introductions are over, and now the real game begins. The city is plunged into total chaos, infested with giant monsters and covered by a poisonous fog that forces people to seek refuge underground to survive. Fortunately, Dokja was prepared for this situation and uses an item from his inventory called Elaine's monkey lungs, which neutralizes the poison and allows him to breathe for 20 minutes. Heading to a store in search of canned food, Dokja is surprised to find a dying young woman lying on the ground, desperately asking for help. Unable to ignore her suffering, Dokja decides to assist her and carries her in his arms while searching for the nearest underground train station. Finally, our hero arrives at Jumho Station but finds it closed. However, the barely energized young woman indicates to him that exit number 4 of the station is open. Dokja knocks on the door and discovers that the place is inhabited by a group of people who, like him, have taken refuge there, forming small survival communities. The people inside the station do not want to allow anyone else in, arguing that it's full, even after Dokja informs them about the presence of an injured woman. However, Dokja pushes through despite the resistance, managing to enter and drive away some of the occupants. Once inside the safe zone, Dokja removes his mask and hands it to the young woman, explaining that although she won't fully recover, the Elaine's monkey lungs will help counteract a large portion of the poison. Dokja doesn't seem to recognize the young woman, leading him to deduce that she's not an important character in TMSA. But he still attempts to check her stats. However, he decides to postpone it due to the commotion caused by his presence. The self-proclaimed leader of the survivors demands that he identify himself. The constellations frown upon the presence of this unpleasant individual, who treats Dokja with contempt and aggression. One of the leader's followers recognizes the woman, mentioning that she belonged to another group that never returned, which provokes mockery from the men. Dokja identifies this group as the typical villains of the post-apocalyptic genre, people who have lost their moral compass and pose a danger to others. Chialsu, the leader of the group, demands that Dokja hand over the woman and the bag of food he carries. The constellations, enraged, request an additional event in which Dokja must eliminate the bandits within 5 minutes, without specifying the rewards and punishments. Dokja confronts the men, and despite some of them having the blessing of a constellation, they are no match for our hero, who has invested time in accumulating points and coins to improve his level. This demonstrates that even if a person has a sponsor, they must continue to strengthen themselves. Dokja reads the data of the group's leader and recognizes him from the book, a character who is nothing more than a nuisance, and is killed by Hyuk in the novel. However, he is now standing in front of him, alive, which leads our hero to wonder why things are different. Trying to find some humanity, Dokja returns to the wounded young woman and remembers that some people are too dangerous to continue living and will only bring more pain if allowed to. Therefore, he decides to end Chialsu, leaving his men without a leader and earning more coins in the process. Back with the woman in his arms, Dokja demands to meet the rest of the survivors. Dokja descends to the main level of the station and is surprised to discover that Sangha and the rest of his companions have taken refuge there. The group is glad to see him and thanks Hyuk for safely leading them to the place. Dokja asks about Hyuk and is informed that he departed to an unknown destination the previous day, leaving them at the station. Then, he realizes that's the reason why Chialsu was still alive when he arrived, as he didn't have the chance to meet him and eliminate him. Everyone celebrates Dokja's arrival, except for Han, who fears that Dokja seeks revenge for being abandoned on the bridge. Han suggests that Dokja be immediately expelled, arguing that he is dangerous. However, a smiling young man named Inho interrupts and says that there is no need for violence. It turns out that Inho is the true leader of the survivors and has a sponsor. Dokja recognizes the name, although he can't place it exactly. Worried that Inho may seek retaliation for hurting his men on the upper level, Dokja is surprised when Inho tells him that his men have informed him that he saved lives and brought food, making him a hero. Later, Dokja reunites with his friends, who inform him that the station currently houses 87 people. Hyunseong vocalizes what everyone is thinking. All these survivors have killed someone to stay alive. The group is divided into 2 subgroups, the central group and the annex, and it is obvious that the strongest ones are in the central group, while the most vulnerable ones are in the annex. When Dokja asks Hyunseong which group he is in, the soldier responds that although he was invited to the central group, his sense of justice and morality led him to choose the annex group, as he believes he can help those people. Dokja congratulates him on his decision, which makes Hyunseong feel proud. The conversation is interrupted when Inho approaches Dokja with a smile and offers him a leadership position in the main group, telling him that he has the power to save people and has already brought food. However, Dokja rejects the offer. Later, Dokja and his friends sit down to eat and soon find themselves surrounded by people demanding to share the food. In the midst of the chaos, Dokja remembers In-ho from TMSA and realizes that he is one of the worst characters, someone who takes advantage of others' desperation to gain power. In-ho is aware that Dokja is caught between a rock and a hard place, so he informs the marginalized annex group that the young man has joined the main group and that they will redistribute the food. However, Dokja surprises everyone by stating that he is not there to be charitable, but to sell the food. In this way, Dokja amazes everyone by announcing that starting from the next meal, each person must pay 10 coins. At that moment, Hee-won, the girl he rescued, wakes up and pays her share, encouraging others to do the same and acknowledging Dokja's effort in risking his life to obtain food. Everyone exchanges coins individually, and even Gil-young pays for the chocolate bar Dokja had given him earlier. Hee-won praises Dokja for his idea, as it breaks the dominant group's monopoly over the food. But Hyun-sung expresses doubts about the high price of the food, set at 50 coins each. Nevertheless, Dokja shows confidence and asks Hyun-sung to be patient. As time passes and day turns into night, Hyun-sung decides to stay awake and keep watch. However, Dokja offers to take the first shift in his place, mentioning that he has work to do and pointing to the line of people asking him if he still intends to sell food. The next morning, Hee-won is surprised to see that all of Dokja's food has been sold, although she is concerned that In-ho and the dominant group will buy the majority and regain their monopoly. She thought Dokja wanted to weaken their power. He agrees with her but says that he is still happy since he has earned a large number of coins from the sales. Hee-won feels somewhat alarmed by his apparent greed but decides to put it aside and orders everyone to eat all the food they have saved. Confused once again by Sanga and the others' automatic trust in him, Hee-won sets aside a portion of her food and eats the rest. At that moment, In-ho announces to the marginalized annex group that food rations will be very limited, and that the only ways to receive more food will be to become an explorer or to barter something of value in exchange. He explains that this decision has been inspired by Dokja's words, inciting the members of the marginalized annex group to resent him. Helpless, the station residents try to buy more food but are discouraged by the high prices. Hee-won points out one of the men selling food and tells Dokja to leave him alone, as he was the one who tried to abuse her and she plans to get revenge. Dokja checks his attributes through the character list and is impressed by them, considering accepting her as a member of the group. For a while, the two wander around the station, observing their surroundings. Hee-won becomes enraged upon realizing that some women from the marginalized annex group are sneaking into the stores of the dominant group, presumably with the intention of trading sex for food. However, Dokja persuades Hee-won not to intervene, reminding her that they will starve without that exchange and telling her that the way to solve the problem is to attack the root and interfere with the food supply. Just then, a timid black-furred Dokja appears, commenting on how relaxed everyone seems and informing them that Bae-young is outside receiving disciplinary measures. The Dokja claims that he has finally come for the incarnations, and they, mistaking his intention to help, beg him to give them food. Pleased, the Dokja adds a penalty to the scenario that limits the accumulation of food, destroying all existing reserves. Panic grips the marginalized annex group as they see their food disappear. Filled with sadistic delight, the Dokja also adds a survival cost, demanding that the marginalized annex group pay 100 coins daily until they clear main scenario 2. Dokja watches these changes with anticipation, thinking that the situation is finally resembling forms of survival. The satisfied Dokja disappears, and Dokja explains to Hee-won that he predicted the Dokja's actions to harass the incarnations. The station residents are distressed by the loss of their food, and Dokja correctly predicts that In-ho has understood his anticipation of this situation. Meanwhile, In-ho announces to the station residents that food rations will only be distributed to the explorers, causing many people to sign up as explorers. Dokja's group becomes tense as they realize that they also have to join as explorers if they want to eat, but Dokja reassures them by reminding them that they can now hunt monsters for food. Upon learning about their plans, In-ho sends a reluctant hand to hunt in the tunnels with Dokja's group. Meanwhile, as he predicts In-ho's thoughts, Dokja begins to understand the mechanisms of his omniscient reader's viewpoint ability. The 6-member group faces the food acquisition sub-scenario as they move through the dark tunnels. Concerned for the group's safety, Hee-won and Hyun-sung ask if it's possible to leave Gil-young and the women behind, respectively, but Dokja ignores them, reminding them that in this new world, everyone has their strengths. He then calls Gil-young, and the boy demonstrates his insect collector attribute by summoning cockroaches and using them as scouts, successfully convincing the others of his worth. As they venture further into the tunnels, the group discovers a scene of large-scale massacre, with human corpses and scattered monsters on the ground. Dokja speculates that the monsters were likely slaughtered by Yoonghyuk as he advanced, and wonders why the protagonist left so quickly. Then, explaining that the sub-scenario requires hunting monsters instead of simply scavenging among the dead, Dokja uses his weapon to open up an earth rat and extract its spine, which he carves into an improvised sword for Hee-won. As she sharpens the sword, the others begin crafting spears in a similar fashion, using bones of different sizes from the earth rats to adapt them to their height. Interested in their actions, some constellations grant them sponsorship coins, and Dokja advises the others to invest the coins in their attributes whenever possible. They advance once again, now fully armed, and encounter 13 more earth rats, which they prepare to attack. The group successfully fights off the earth rats, with Hyun-sung and Hee-won's skills standing out. Dokja, who has been observing them, points out that it's the power of what will soon become the steel sword and comments that Hee-won seems to have invested most of her coins in strength rather than resistance. Gil-young and Sanga also fight well, although Dokja expresses surprise at how quickly Sanga has adapted. Han, located near the rear, contributes nothing to the battle. Once the fight is over, Dokja uses the character list on Hyun-sung, realizing that his great strength is due to the starter pack granted by his sponsor, the Master of Steel. The group asks how they can cook the earth rat meat to eat it, and upon Dokja's response that there will be a way, they ask if he has prior knowledge of the situation. Dokja remains silent. Right at that moment, a hidden giant earth rat appears and attacks, grabbing Han and dragging him away. Han clings to Sanga, and despite the others' attempts to rescue them, both are dragged into a tunnel. Dokja observes that the hole they disappeared into has a strange energy around it. Checking TMSA on his phone, he recognizes the hole as the entrance to the edge of darkness, the habitat of the earth rats. He turns around and informs the others that he and Gil-young will enter the hole to find their lost companions, while Hee-won and Hyun-sung will stay on the surface. Dokja and Gil-young venture into the tunnel, able to walk normally on its walls despite its completely vertical nature. They can't see due to the dark ether filling the tunnel, and as they walk, Gil-young asks if Dokja lets Sanga and Han be captured on purpose. Upon accepting it, the observing constellations are surprised, but Dokja explains that he knew they would be taken to the rat's treasure, which was his objective from the start. Gil-young rejects it, reasoning that if Dokja were that cruel, he wouldn't have saved Gil-young on the train. He then asks if Dokja knows about the scenarios and if they will be allowed a wish at the end of the scenarios. Dokja lies to him and says yes. At that moment, they reach the end of the tunnel and enter the earth rat's treasure. Inside the earth rat's treasure, Dokja warns Gil-young to be careful as he knows the area is dangerous. They observe how the earth rats gather and the area is illuminated with flames, and then they overhear Han and Sanga arguing by chance. It is revealed that Han was the one who stole Sanga's bicycle in an attempt to get her to accept his offer of giving her a ride home, which ended up with both of them traveling on the train. The constellations are irritated with Han and the argument he caused. Dokja, accommodatingly, throws his spine weapon at Han, scratching his mouth and silencing him. Sanga recognizes the spine and realizes that Dokja has come to rescue them. Dokja's attention is drawn to the appearance of the Keeper of Darkness. The pressure from his presence incapacitates Gil-young, and Dokja leaves him hidden to be able to help Sanga and Han. He manages to free them from their restraints, but his knife corrodes, and he replaces it with a bone spear as he observes the Keeper of Darkness and recalls what he knows about him. Sanga listens to him speak and, activating her interpreter ability, has a brief conversation with him, stating that he keeps repeating the phrase "become a mother." He points at Sanga while speaking and, upon her refusal, points at Han instead. When Han also refuses, the Keeper of Darkness inserts a tentacle into Han's throat, and Dokja recalls belatedly that demonic species conceive their offspring within the bodies of other species. Dokja pushes Sanga back and then stabs the tentacles attached to Han. However, his weapon is insufficient, and he is unable to free the other man. He calls upon Dokja Biryu and orders him to hand over the broken sword, the item he received in exchange for the ichthyosaur core during the Dokja bag exchange. Although the weapon itself is in poor condition, Dokja utilizes the pure white star energy ability and activates the Sword of Faith. Despite his recognized lack of swordsmanship skills, he manages to inflict severe damage to the Keeper of Darkness, thanks to his knowledge of its attack patterns extracted from TMSA and the ether properties of his weapon. The others watch in astonishment as he defends himself. Trembling, the Keeper of Darkness retreats and asks Dokja, translated by Sangha, how he knows its weaknesses. Dokja casually responds that it's because he reads a lot of books. Knowing that his stamina will run out, Dokja activates Marker and uses Hyunsung's weapon training to incapacitate the Keeper of Darkness. Biryu and the observing constellations are left astonished and amazed by his decisive victory, and Biryu points out the presence and benefits of his false ether blade. Just then, the blade's durability runs out, rendering the broken faith useless. At Dokja's request, Biryu hands him the meager compensation for completing the sub-level. Dokja refuses to kill the Keeper of Darkness, even though Biryu offers great rewards for his death, and Han kills him himself when the other man looks away. Both Dokja and Han receive rewards for defeating the Keeper of Darkness, but the latter gains significantly more than the former. Although Han is initially delighted by the incredible reward he receives, he quickly panics when Demon King Asmodeus curses him for killing one of his subordinates. Dokja turns around, indifferent and unsurprised, and searches for items in the treasure alongside Gilyoung and Sangha, each retrieving their own belongings. Dokja reassures the others, who are disappointed by the lack of good items, knowing that Yoonghyuk must have already passed through and looted the place. He then locates the magical stove and cooks a rat leg with it. The others become excited, and everyone gathers to eat. Dokja dispels Han's anxiety and jokingly warns him of his possible defeat at the hands of Asmodeus. While they eat, Sangha worries about not contributing much to the fight, but Dokja tells her that she helped with the translations, privately acknowledging that she is indeed right. He walks away as the others continue eating and finds the box that previously contained the magic power stove, knowing that it is actually a useful item. He goes to explain its use to Sangha, but she manages to read the text on the front and identifies it as a random object box. She urges him to use it, and feeling slightly embarrassed for unintentionally undermining his explanation, he inserts Broken Faith and the 7th grade demon core he extracted from the Dark Keeper's body. He recalls the description of the survival form's random object box's usage as the box starts glowing with a dazzling light. Biryu is greatly alarmed by the presence of the random object box, and as Dokja recalls its history, the Dokkibai temporarily closes the channel. Dokja feels disappointed but quickly gets distracted by his nervousness about the outcome of the random object box. As the box completes its generation, he retrieves the object from inside under the excited gaze of Sangha and Gilyoung. The object turns out to be Unbreakable Faith, the restored star relic that previously belonged to Kaizenix. Dokja is left speechless by its classification and incredulously asks if he can really have it, and his companions encourage him to keep it. The quartet begins planning their departure. Gilyoung informs the others that no insects survive the presence of the Keeper of Darkness, so he cannot use diverse communication, and when asked, he reveals that there is one insect he can summon. However, when he attempts to summon it, the area starts shaking with vibrations from the surface, and Dokja shouts at him to stop. Dokja has realized that Gilyoung is attempting to summon the high-ranking Insect King, whose appearance could destroy the area. Amazed by the strength of his ability but knowing that it could cause a collapse that would kill them all, Dokja tells Gilyoung not to use the ability. He tells the others that they should wait until the insects appear and Gilyoung can safely use his ability. But Sangha speaks up, offering to substitute for Gilyoung with a similar ability. She is reluctant to reveal her origin and doesn't answer Dokja's questions about her attribute and sponsor. She uses her ability to create a highlighted thread that leads out of the area. Dokja realizes that this must be the stigma provided by her sponsor. At that moment, the channel reopens, and Baeyoung appears, conversing with Dokja about the recent events as the group returns to Jumho Station. Dokja and the others meet up with Hee-won and Hyunsung. They eat, and Dokja hands the ancient iron shield to Hyunsung. The group exits the tunnels and finds the station residents in a panic due to the approaching settlement survival time. The marginalized group members ask for coins from the dominant group, but they refuse, imposing unreasonable conditions for the exchange. Hee-won, in particular, gets angry after overhearing a tasteless exchange, and her attribute is about to bloom. Concerned about the station's situation, the group turns to Dokja, who points out that he has the most coins out of all the station residents. Upon noticing Dokja's presence, In-ho calls attention to him, pointing out that he has many coins and using the incitement ability to turn the station residents against him. Dokja listens to Baeyoung's announcement about the remaining time until the settlement and rejects all the station residents, questioning why he should give them his coins. Inho points out that just yesterday he took their coins for food. The furious crowd demands that he return them. Although Sanga and Hyunsung try to refute Inho's arguments, the man continues to threaten with the worst if Dokja doesn't pay. Although they advance towards him, none of the bystanders attack Dokja until a member of the group takes the initiative, shouting that they can harvest coins if they kill Dokja. However, the man bites off more than he can chew, as Dokja unsheathes his sword and cuts off his arm. Next, our protagonist addresses the shocked crowd, pointing out that this crisis is entirely constructed by the dominant group and that their current actions are driven by fear. Dokja continues speaking over Inho and points out, firstly, that the strength of the dominant group is much greater than that of the marginalized group, and secondly, that only explorers from the dominant group return from trips to the surface while the rest die. He reminds the station residents of Han Minsung's statement that killing would bring them coins and asks how the dominant group could know that. Realizing that the dominant group has been gradually killing off the marginalized group, the latter becomes enraged. Dokja tells them to reclaim what has been taken from them, and together with the marginalized group, his group prepares to attack the dominant group. With his great strength, Dokja incapacitates the dominant group so that the weaker members of the marginalized group and the members of his party can easily kill them. Hyun steps forward to attack a specific member of the Cheoldu group, as the evolution conditions of Crouching Figure are fulfilled. Her attribute evolves into Evil Judge, and she invokes Judgment Hour to massacre the members of the dominant group. Noticing Hyun's incredible presence on the battlefield, Dokja continues fighting until the only remaining enemy is Inho. Upon Dokja's command, Hyun brutally kills him, the fight ends, and as exhaustion takes hold of the people, the value of survival is established. Dokja's group and the other incarnations with enough coins survive, and Dokja tells everyone present to wake up and pay attention to the scenarios, starting to think about the scenario that awaits them at Chungnyeoro Station. Dokja notices the next morning that Han has disappeared from Jumho Station, along with numerous other survivors from the massacre of the previous night. Sanga expresses concern for the remaining survivors who reject Hyun's offer to accompany Dokja's group. Dokja believes this is due to his and Hyun's coldness towards the survivors, as well as the brutal treatment they inflicted on the Cheoldu group. He asks Hyunsung to prepare provisions for their journey and requests him to find a battery for his phone. Hyun confirms with Dokja that they are about to depart, and amused by his stoic attitude, she punches him, transferring him 1,500 coins. She explains that she received it from the killings of the previous night, and Dokja feels somewhat uncomfortable, knowing that he is richer than she thinks. Unaware of this, Hyun leaves, while the constellations enjoy their camaraderie. Dokja catches Baehyung's attention and presses him to give him the money he earned in yesterday's program, which Baehyung hands over along with the overdue indirect messages. Dokja uses the coins he just earned to upgrade his statistics, knowing that he will see an increase in coins earned as their journeys progress. The group gathers once again and leaves Jumho Station, receiving the scenario window for the main scenario too. As they head towards their assigned objective, Chungnyeoro Station, they encounter more Earth Rats, which they combat with their newfound powers. They pass by Yaksu Station and finally arrive at Dongguk University Station, at which point the group is exhausted from the battles and decides to take a break. Sanga and Hyun separate to search for feminine hygiene products and other necessities, while Hyunsung and Gilyung head towards the restrooms. Dokja, in response to the women's concern and suspicion, declares that he will head to the surface. Outside Dongguk University Station, Dokja swiftly moves through the poisonous fog and finds a bronze statue of Yujeong Samyongdae, a monk from the Joseon dynasty. An expectant constellation, dressed in a straw mat, watches as Dokja prays to the statue. To the constellation's surprise and horror, Dokja draws his unwavering faith, activates the Blade of Faith, and without hesitation, topples the statue. Back underground, Dokja eats ground rat meat to counteract his poisoning and faces Baehyung's panicked reprimands. Baehyung is concerned about how General Calvo de la Justicia will react to the desecration of his idol. But Dokja isn't worried since he has received rewards for his destruction. He saves the section describing the method he just used on his phone and thinks it's better to use this method than to spend coins on similar abilities. Just then, the other members of the group return from their various trips, and Dokja talks to them about Yujeong Samyongdae with Sanga's help, stating that the old monk sent his belongings to aid Korea in its time of need. Pleased, the Calvo General de la Justicia pardons Dokja, much to Baehyung's bewilderment. Meanwhile, Dokja passes the beads of Samyongdae to Sanga, knowing that her magical power recovery ability will be helpful. To a sulking Heewon, who is upset that almost everyone in the group received rewards except her, he gives the straw mat from Samyongdang. Though initially reluctant, she accepts the mat and gains an upgrade in justice and willpower. Grateful, she jokingly decides to pray to Samyongdang at Dokja's suggestion. The group leaves Dongguk University Station and, on their way to Chungnyeoro Station, they encounter the sub-scenario of the ghost prison. Dokja recognizes it as a challenging trial for a regressor like Younghyuk and warns the others to be careful as a secondary event is about to begin. Right at that moment, they are engulfed in fog, and the others start screaming in panic. Dokja hears the voice of a woman speaking to him and briefly sees her face before the fourth wall ability activates and frees him from the ghost prison. Sangha finds him, having been protected by her beads, and watches as he uses his newly acquired ability, Destroy Evil, to deactivate the ghost prison. Hyunsung and Gilyung emerge shaken, while Heewon remains trapped in the panic of the prison. Dokja stuns her with a blow to the neck. The scenario ends, and Dokja deals with the specters that appear afterward, extracting the specter stone from their bodies. Dokja watches with Sangha as Hyunsung and Gilyung slowly recover, concerned about whether it is safe to proceed with them in this state. However, at that moment, a girl appears from the tunnel, questioning them about their presence. Sangha recognizes her, and Dokja confirms through the character list that she is indeed Jehai, the high school student who won the first event by killing her classmates and one of the main characters of TMSA. The main scenario too ends, confirming that they have finally arrived at Chungnyeoro. Dokja's group follows Jehai to Chungnyeoro Station and goes up to the platforms. They encounter station residents chatting with Jehai and offering her rental rooms, but Jehai orders them to leave before telling the group that she intends to leave them alone from now on. Dokja and the others notice a boy fiercely defending a green square on the platform floor, and Sangha wonders why. Dokja asks Jehai if she knows where Younghyuk is, claiming to be his companion. She tells him that Younghyuk is not present and directs him to another follower of the man, sitting on the platform. Younghyuk's follower, a young man around Jehai's age, is excited to meet them and tells Dokja his story with Younghyuk. Dokja quickly summarizes his story and dismisses him, allowing Hyunsung to interrogate him about the station's supplies, only rejoining to ask about the Landlord Alliance. Just then, Gilyung speaks up, asking to go to the bathroom on behalf of Sangha. The boy offers to take them upstairs to the bathrooms, explaining that they are hard to access, and along the way, he explains that the green areas scattered throughout the station are rooms related to the ongoing main scenario. As they climb up, the boy informs Dokja that Younghyuk told them to stay alone, with no intention of challenging the Landlord Alliance. When they reach the upper level, the boy becomes tense and warns the group to be careful. In the passage leading to the bathroom, they encounter a frantic crowd begging for mercy from Pildu SSI. Dokja identifies some of the men guarding the crowd as members of the Landlord Alliance, but is unable to identify the specific individual he is looking for. At that moment, Gilyung stumbles, pushed by the crowd. A notification warns them that Gilyung has invaded private property, and the terrified crowd retreats as the Landlord Alliance members mock them. One of the men asks Gilyung what he thinks he's doing and informs him that he will teach him a lesson about trespassing on others' territory. A system notification announces that Gong Pildu has activated the Armed Zone ability and demands 500 coins for the invasion. When Gilyung retreats to Dokja's side, the man speaking shifts his attention to Dokja, who wonders why Younghyuk lets these idiots live. Dokja recalls what he knows about the 10 evils and Gong Pildu from TMSA. Pushing Gilyung back, he begins to interrogate Gong Pildu, asking to see the man in person and not someone pretending to be him. Ignoring the men claiming to be Gong Pildu and the armed zone turrets pointing at him, Dokja moves directly towards Gong Pildu's green zone until he finds the owner himself. The character list reveals Gong Pildu's high statistics, and Dokja wonders if he should fight him, ultimately opting to simply talk to him. Dokja asks Gong Pildu to allow his group to stay in his green zone, rejecting the owner's coin rent, and offering information as payment instead. He tells the Landlord Alliance that he is Younghyuk's companion, which surprises and arouses suspicion from them due to Younghyuk's destructive activities. As he turns to leave, intending to let Gong Pildu think about his offer, Gong Pildu stops him, calling him a scammer. Irritated, Dokja pretends to ignore him, but Gong Pildu demands payment in coins anyway. Tension quickly escalates, and Dokja rushes back to his group, hiding behind Hyunsung's shield to avoid attacks from Gong Pildu's turret. Knowing the risk to his group is high, Dokja warns Gong Pildu to stop, as Younghyuk is returning. Fortuitously, Younghyuk appears at that moment, accompanied by Jehai. Dokja's omniscient reader ability allows him to hear the thoughts of the regressor, which consist of stunned silence while Dokja cheerfully greets him. Although he remains silent, Young-hyuk eventually points his sword at Gong Pildu, which Gong Pildu interprets as confirmation of his alliance with Dokja, and he lets them go. After using the bathroom, the entire group returns to the platform, where Dokja and Young-hyuk argue. Dokja checks Young-hyuk's attribute window, surprised by his high statistics. Young-hyuk asks Dokja why he's staring at him, ignoring the use of his abilities, and he becomes irritated with his response, falling silent. Dokja looks through his omniscient reader ability as Young-hyuk uses the Sage's Eye and observes the abilities and statistics of the group. The regressor is disappointed by Hyun-sung's limited growth, much to Dokja's irritation, but then he is surprised to see something in the attribute window of another group member. Young-hyuk looks at the members of the group that Dokja has gathered, astonished by something he sees through the Sage's Eye. Observing their thoughts through the omniscient reader's point of view, Dokja assumes that Young-hyuk has seen Hee-won's judge attribute. The woman in question challenges Young-hyuk, but Dokja interrupts before Young-hyuk can say anything, asking him why he has let Gong Pildu live. Young-hyuk rejects him, thinking that his foresight is weak, and an irritated Dokja threatens him. Young-hyuk dismisses him again and leaves with Jae in tow. Shortly before main scenario 3 is activated, Dokja worries about how to navigate the scenario. Hee-won distracts him by asking about Gong Pildu. Upon his explanation, she becomes enraged and decides to attack the Landlord Alliance using Judgment Hour. Unfortunately, the ability doesn't activate, and Dokja explains that the constellation's understanding of good and evil is different from that of incarnations. Seeing the group's distress, Dokja reassures them and explains that they can still be defeated if they fight against Gong Pildu outside his armed zone. Impressed by his insight, the group begins to think of ways to move forward. Young appears and announces the next trial, which will last for a week and consists of being able to defend against the monsters that will attack the station every night at midnight. Young tells them that the only way to be safe from the monsters is to be inside a green room, but unfortunately, there aren't enough rooms for everyone. Worried about having to fight and possibly kill people to secure rooms, the group splits up to search for rooms they can stay in. Dokja knows that there are no available rooms in Cheongnyeoro, so he stays in his place, reading TMSA and wondering if the group members will be strong enough to defend themselves even against people who have no ill intentions. After Young's announcement, the station platform turns into chaos. Dokja peacefully stays on the sidelines, reading TMSA to the confusion of Young and the constellations. Dokja realizes that they can't see him reading the text and wonders about TLS 123's power to create such a novel. Meanwhile, he casually converses with the boy who guided them before, promising not to take away his green zone. Jae joins them and is intrigued by his relaxation, but Young-hyuk sends her back to her room, leaving Dokja with a complicated look. The group members return, distressed and angry for not finding any available rooms. Dokja offers two solutions to their current dilemma. The first, he explains, is less dangerous. The group starts choosing that option, but Sangha asks Dokja to elaborate, and he explains that they would have to kill a group of 5 people who had already taken a room for themselves. Young is initially willing to do it, but the adults are reluctant to kill people who are relatively innocent, and instead ask for the second method. Dokja feels relieved as he had always intended to use the second method, as it would be better to catch the attention of the constellations. The group is somewhat exasperated by his cunning, so he apologizes. As he guides them towards the tunnel leading to Yuljiro 3, he explains that they won't have to kill anyone with this method, but they will need to have great willpower. They find the red zone from which the monsters will soon emerge, and Dokja tells them that they won't fight them or run to the next station. Instead, they will have to head towards the red zone before moving to the side, where he knows a green zone awaits them. With no time to explain further, he reminds Sangha, Hee-won, and Hyun-sung to work together before dragging Gil-young along with him. Main Scenario 3 is activated, and the 3 adults run towards the red zone as planned, while the monsters head towards them, leaving Dokja and Gil-young behind. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. If you have reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you have been one of the few people to make it here. So comment the word omniscient in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.